Here's a little paradox to start your day. The week felt quiet. No giant front-page cyber meltdown. And yet, it might be the loudest warning we'll get about 2026. Imagine it's Monday. You open your inbox and see a notice from your telecom. We detected unauthorized access in October. Not this week, 2 months ago. A vendor's login was used. Some of your account details were exposed, not passwords, not card numbers, but your full name, your address, your date of birth, your phone number. The stuff scammers love. Let that sink in for a second. The attack happened earlier. You're only hearing about it now. That was the vibe of December 7th through 14th. No single mega breach. Instead, a string of disclosures from incidents that actually happened back in August and October at a mobile carrier in Canada, a pharmaceutical research firm, and a supplier tied to a major electronics brand. Different logos. Same message. The timeline is the problem. In other words, the quiet wasn't calm, it was delay. So let's slow that down for a second. Here's what actually happened, in plain English. A Canadian carrier, Freedom Mobile, said it detected suspicious activity on October 23rd in its customer account management system. The trail led back to a subcontractor's access. Data like names, addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, and account numbers were viewed. The company said it was a limited number of customers, and crucially, not passwords or payment info. Notifications went out in early December. A life sciences company called Innotiv disclosed a ransomware incident that happened in August. A group known as Chilin claimed it and said they exfiltrated, meaning quietly copied out, more than 160,000 files. Public notices mentioned thousands of people were affected, which hints that the file count far outstrips the count of individuals notified. That's typical with these cases. And then there's a supplier tied to ASUS. In early December, ASUS confirmed that a vendor was hacked, and attackers stole camera-related source code used in its smartphone line. The company said no customer personal data was involved and core systems weren't touched. Still, source code in the wild has its own long-tail risks. Zooming out, aggregators that track breaches logged thousands of incidents across 2025 by mid-December. Many of those involved third-party access and credential abuse. But here's the key. This week's news wasn't new attacks. It was new visibility into older compromises. Here's the thing. The lag is the lesson. Let's talk breach lag. That's the delay between 3 moments. When attackers get in, when you detect them, and when you tell the world. Attackers might only need hours or days to slip in and start pulling data. Detection can take weeks. Investigations and regulatory reviews can take months. That window, when they're in and you don't know, or you know but you're still piecing it together, is where the damage compounds. Think of it like termites in a house. You don't hear them. The surface looks fine. Then one day, your foot goes through the floor. Disclosure is the foot through the floor moment. The rot? That's dwell time and third-party gaps. So how do these compromises actually happen? It's often painfully simple. Instead of a movie-style zero-day exploit, attackers start with valid credentials, a contractor's login, a supplier's access token, a support account that's allowed to do exactly what the attacker now does. In security shorthand, that's valid accounts abuse. Nothing exotic, just trusted access used in untrusted ways. Once inside, the modern ransomware playbook is exfiltrate first, encrypt later. They quietly copy the goods, then decide whether to lock systems. Even if a victim restores from backup, the threat remains. Pay us, or we leak what we stole. That's why you see groups bragging about file counts on leak sites. It's leverage. So what actually changes when we view the week through that lens? First, identity becomes the battleground. In the Freedom Mobile case, the exposed data, names, addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, account numbers, doesn't log you into a bank, but it helps someone convince a support agent to transfer your number. That's a SIM swap. Once they control your phone number, they can intercept codes for SMS-based logins and reset a lot of your life. That's a big deal. Second, research and IP are collateral. With Innotiv, file exfiltration may include more than a neat list of customers. It could be lab data, internal documents, proprietary methods. Even if only a subset triggers legal notices, the operational exposure can be much larger. In other words, the number of letters sent out isn't the whole story. Third, code is a crown jewel too. ASUS said the breach involved camera source code via a supplier. Even if no consumer data was touched, code theft can speed up vulnerability discovery by attackers, enable copycat features by competitors, or show up later as supply chain tampering. It's not a headline-grabbing, your data is out there incident, but for engineers, it's the nightmare where integrity and trust erode quietly. Here's what actually matters here. We're seeing the same root patterns across very different companies. Breach lag stretches from hours to months. Third-party access expands the blast radius. Exfiltration happens before the alarm bell rings. And that raises a question for 2026. If the pattern is stable, what has to change? Let's ground this in the experience of a security team. If you're a CISO or an engineering leader, your board isn't asking about APT tactics. They're asking, how long until we know? That's where two simple metrics show up: mean time to detect and mean time to respond. MTTD, MTTR. They're not perfect, but they turn the abstract into a clock, and more regulators are leaning into 72-hour report expectations after you confirm an incident. That compresses everything. Now, supply chain. Contracts don't stop attackers. Architecture does. It helps to assume every vendor is a potential doorway. So, isolate vendor access. Give them the minimum they need for the shortest time. Require strong, phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. Think hardware keys or platform biometrics, not just SMS. And for software suppliers, insist on signed builds and a clear software bill of materials, a simple inventory of what went into a product, so you're not guessing later. So let's pause and summarize. The quiet week was a mirror. It reflected three realities. Identity is fragile. Vendors are part of your network whether you like it or not, and once data leaves, you can't reel it back in. That's the terrain. What about everyday impact, beyond the headlines? If you're a customer of a breached service, watch for targeted, context-aware scams. Messages that include your real address or account numbers are persuasive. Don't trust the channel. Verify using a known, separate path. If you work in research or product development, assume that leaked internal files can be mined for clues. That might show up later as suspiciously specific phishing or as bug reports that aren't coming from where you expect. If you ship consumer devices, treat source code like cash. The value isn't just theft, it's the roadmap it gives to anyone looking for weaknesses. Here's where people get surprised. Data protection isn't just encrypt the whole database. In many breaches, attackers access live systems where data is already decrypted for business use. So two levers start to matter more. Minimize what you keep and reduce the value of what leaks. In other words, shrink the pile and scramble the pieces. Data minimization sounds boring. It's not. If you don't need to store a date of birth after verification, don't. If you can tokenize a card number so you only keep a reference, do it. If you can encrypt specific fields with keys stored in a separate system, not just encrypt the disk, that limits what's usable even if an attacker is inside the app. Let's shift to the elephant in the room: credentials. By late 2025, the pool of leaked logins and session tokens has grown massive. Attackers recycle those in credential stuffing, trying known email password combos across services. That's why the move to phishing-resistant authentication matters. FIDO2 keys and platform authenticators don't rely on reusable secrets. Even if a password leaks, the key doesn't. So, what should teams actually consider in 2026? Not a full checklist, just a few levers that change the game. Treat vendor access like a hazardous material. Time-bound it, segment it, monitor it. If a supplier only needs to upload files, don't grant them a broad portal with admin rights. Push for phishing-resistant MFA broadly, especially on support tools, cloud consoles, and any system that can move money or change identity data. Hardware keys where it counts. Instrument for exfiltration, not just intrusion. Watch for unusual file transfer volumes, outbound connections to uncommon destinations, and access outside normal working hours. It's like motion sensors on the back door, not just a lock on the front. Minimize and compartmentalize data. Shorten retention. Tokenize sensitive fields. Use field-level encryption with strong key management. Less gold in one vault means smaller blasts. Rehearse the 72-hour sprint. Practice how you confirm an incident, who decides what, how you notify customers, and how you coordinate with regulators. Dry runs turn panic into process. If you're exploring this space as a product owner or business leader, here's a framing that helps. Think like an insurer. Ask, if something goes wrong, how big is the check? Then pick the controls that cut the payout. Faster detection lowers incident length. Vendor segmentation reduces contagion. Data minimization shrinks legal exposure. FIDO reduces account takeover. None of these eliminate risk. They make it survivable. There are also a couple of open questions worth holding lightly. Companies often say, "We've seen no evidence of misuse." That can be true today and change tomorrow. Absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. And when victim counts aren't quantified, like a limited number, It's not necessarily evasive. Sometimes the data simply isn't fully mapped yet. Investigations take time. The key is whether the organization narrows the gap between knowing and telling. On the ASUS supplier example, it's easy to shrug because there's no consumer PII. But source code theft is a slow burn risk. It can reappear months later as a well-aimed bug exploit or as ecosystem trust issues in firmware supply chains. If you build software, picture your build system like a food factory. Cleanliness, traceability, and seals matter because people downstream can't easily test every byte. Let's take a breath and pull the thread all the way through. The December 7th to 14th window wasn't a lull. It was a delayed echo from earlier compromises. Freedom Mobile reminded us that identity data is a lever for social engineering. Inotiv showed how ransomware now prioritizes data theft over splashy outages. The ASUS supplier case highlighted that code is currency, and vendors sit inside your perimeter whether you label them internal or not. If you work on this stuff, 2026 looks less like stop all breaches and more like compress the timeline and reduce the blast radius. Shorten MTTD and MTTR, harden vendor paths, remove unneeded data, upgrade authentication where it will prevent the most pain. None of that is glamorous. All of it buys daylight, and for everyone else who just wants their phone and accounts to be safe. A couple simple habits still go a long way. Avoid SMS for two-factor when you have a choice. Use a password manager to keep combos unique, and be suspicious of messages that know a little too much about you. The most dangerous email is the one that sounds exactly right. So, was it a quiet week? On the surface, yes. No single detonation. But below the surface, we saw the structure of modern risk. Attacks that start with trusted access, months-long delays that hide the true window of exposure, and disclosures that arrive long after the data has left the building. If you found this useful, a like and subscribe helps us keep making these videos. Thanks for watching.